Yo, I'm Brendan, and today I want to talk about these crazy people out there who are claiming that 401ks are a scam. Instead of trying to talk you out of that necessarily, first I'm going to show you the results of what it's been like for me to invest in a 401k for the last 10 years. I'm going to reveal to you exactly how much money I put in from my own paycheck, my own money. I'll also share with you how much money my employer contributed and how much I made just from investing the money, what kind of returns I got. I'll show you everything that I invested in and what that overall account balance looks like. After all of the revealing that I'm going to do, I'll also talk to you about why some people think a 401k is a scam and why I desperately disagree with those people. I think they have ulterior motives set up whenever they talk about a 401k being a scam, and so we'll talk about my opinions about all that, my feelings on these people who are making those claims. First up, let me show you all the things I invested in and show you the kinds of returns I got with them. So you know right off the bat, I was doing self-directed investing, so I wasn't paying any kind of specialty advisor or getting hammered by a bunch of fees, which I'll show you the fees too here in a minute. I was picking the things I wanted to invest in, picking the amounts, and then investing some money. So I've got a bunch of things in here that I started to invest in, and then later on I changed my mind and really simplified, because I think ultimately for most of us, our investing can be simple and still be really successful. I think I was trying to follow some advice I'd seen online, and I was like, oh, people say you're supposed to invest in mid-cap stocks. Well, I'll pick some kind of fund where I invest in mid-cap stocks. Sure, why not? So I did that. That was only $2,000. And then the bulk of the money I invested was in target date funds. So target date fund is really cool because it basically automatically sets things up for you based on a targeted date of your potential retirement. I basically just come in here and pick a date like 2050 that's kind of sort of close to the date that I would retire, and then it will automatically adjust itself over time. We're not paying anybody to do this. We're not getting hammered by fees. It just self-corrects as time goes on. In the beginning, whenever you're young, it's really focused on growth, and then as you get into your 40s and 50s and 60s, it really ratchets down that kind of aggression and makes it all about just preserving the wealth that you do have. So you can see this is the main one, this TIAA-CREF Lifestyle 2050 kind of fund. I put in over $100,000 over the course of the 10 years of my own money into it. And then I also invested a bit into a similar Vanguard fund. Same kind of finish line, same kind of intention behind the fund and what it's built for. And then just a couple other ones. I jumped into the Vanguard Growth Fund and the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Fund. And so most recently, the thing that I had just set my account to do just on autopilot was automatically invest 75% of all the money that I put into it into that 2050 target date fund, and then another 25% into the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Fund. So I had nobody working on this. I didn't have to spend any time working on it. I had extremely low expenses. I mean, look at this, 0.1% expenses for the target date 2050 fund, and then 0.04% for VTSAX, which just invests in the entire US stock market for me. Super easy to do. For most of us, this is a pretty darn good strategy to invest in something like VTSAX because it's pretty hard to beat. But I'm also just a guy on the internet with a love of axes and breeders and race cars, so don't listen to me when it comes to investing advice. So overall, over the course of 10 years, the total amount of money that came out of my check that I didn't get to live and use and buy burritos and race cars with or do fun stuff with in general was almost $150,000. Maybe I should have cranked it up a little bit more and I would have got the extra like 60 bucks in there and crested that $150,000 mark. But basically averaged $15,000 per year that I invested over that 10-year period. And really, if we want to nitpick, then this is actually over 9 years because I wasn't able to use the 401k the first year I was employed there. The conditions of the 401k were such that after you were there for a year, you got access to it. And so this was really over a 9-year period. So on average, I invested something like $16,600 per year into this 401k, which is pretty aggressive. But the younger we are, the more we need to be aggressive if we want to set ourselves up to have the easiest time in the future. The longer we have that money in the stock market, the better, the more it grows. And frankly, I think it's a little bit easier to cut back on things whenever you're younger because it's really just like impulse control. It's like, do I want to buy cool stuff and go waste money and do this trip and whatever? You can just ratchet that down if you want. When you're a little bit older, like I just turned 37, you got kids, you got a mortgage, you've got medical expenses, like things add up pretty quick. And so it's harder to really like get aggressive, I think, whenever you're older. But for some people, maybe that's not true because maybe by now you're earning some good money and so it's easier for you to do it. However you can do it, the earlier we invest, the more money we end up having. Now let's talk about the sexier stuff, which is how much money I actually made by investing in a 401k. You can see this whole column here under gains and losses, where basically the returns that I got for having invested this money. So if we total up all those gains and losses over the period of time that I've had this invested, basically 9 years, I made $57,600 $659 for having this money invested. And that's not even all the benefits I got from doing this. This is just the overall market gains that I got for having this money invested. I think for a lot of us, especially Gen Z and millennial and people who are younger than us, our alternatives aren't like, oh, should I invest in this thing or should I invest in that thing? I think for most of us, the big decision that we need to make is, should I invest at all? Or should I just keep this money in cash? Or should I buy a bigger house? Or should I just blow the money and go on some cool trips and buy a sports car? The whole reason for me to share this with you is to show you what the potential is if you want to go the investing route. I'm not saying I made the best decision in the world, even though I'm happy with it. I just want to share with you what this journey has been like. So I put away 150 grand and I basically got 57 grand as a reward for having done that for 9 years straight. But I also got more than that because I haven't even factored in any dividends. So this 2050 target date fund that I invested in, this guy gave me a ton of dividends. I mean, almost a quarter of the overall returns were just in dividends, 11 grand overall in dividends. So the total that I got for 9 years of investing in the stock market, not trying to seek out dividends whatsoever, just going for growth, I got $13,000, almost $14,000 just in dividends. So that means I basically made $71,500 for having done this. That's like a really healthy year's salary that I got just for having put this money away. And it's not like it's lost. I still have it. I'm going to use it one day. I'm just not using it today. I'm okay with waiting to use this money because I think it makes sense for me, but a lot of people don't agree with that. They've got a lot of arguments against a 401k saying, oh, it locks your money away. It's a big problem. The taxes are going to eat you up in the end. And another thing they have a huge problem with are the expenses. There's a bunch of people out there crying online claiming that we're paying 1%, 2%, or even more on these different investing accounts that we have hosted with, especially small companies. They're claiming that, oh, you just get hosed by doing this. But years ago, I was curious when I first started learning about investing and fees and how terrible they are for you. Wait a minute. I work at a small company. What if we're getting eaten alive by fees? I haven't seen this really clearly displayed anywhere. I need to figure this out. And so I wanted to double check if our 401k was falling victim to those nasty fees or not. And that's where I found out about this service that was totally free for us to investigate our own 401k and figure out how bad it was. It's called America's Best 401k. Kind of a cheesy name, I know. I was like, is this legit? Is this kind of a scam? What's going on? So I took the information from them over to our controller, who's like the head finance guy for the whole company. And I said, hey, do you know right off the bat what our fees are? Like our total net management fees, what are we paying to go through this other financial company who's hosting this 401k for us? He said, I don't know for sure. I don't think they're terrible, but I can't tell you a number. And I said, great. Well, I found this service that will check it out for us. We just gave them this little participant disclosure form, the company we're working with, and then they came back with this email and they gave me the good news. They said, you have a solid plan with very low cost fund options. Your fund option expense ratios average a great 0.45%. We can only suggest you save as much as you can and take full advantage of any employer matching that exists. So that was a relief to find out that our investing options had really low fees. I mean, paying $3,000 in fees over the course of 10 years when we're talking about a $200,000 balance is tiny, tiny, tiny. And I could have done worse whenever I was picking my investments because you saw that I specifically picked stuff that had really low expense ratios, 0.1%, 0.04%. And that's one of the key things that I looked for whenever I was setting up this account because there were things that had worse expense ratios for sure. You know, like this one right here was another option I could have done, 0.57%, 1.26%. There's things out there that I could have paid a lot of money to access. And so my perspective was, I just don't need to do that. But the fantastic thing is, this isn't even the end of the story because to get this contribution in here, to get 150 grand in there over the last 9 years or so, I said I'd have to average about $16,000 per year to get that money in there. And that's a lot of money to go without. But we're talking about a 401k here, remember? We're talking about an account that very often has an employer match. So I didn't have to put in the full $16,600 per year to get to this contribution amount. Check out this little graph. This shows my employee contributions by source. So the actual amount of money that came out of my paycheck was under $120,000. I contributed $119,230. That was actual money that I could have had for my life. Granted, this is pre-tax money, so I wouldn't have taken home that 119 grand over the course of the 9 years. I couldn't have bought a 911 with that. All that money would have ended up being taxed, but because it went into this 401k, it remained pre-tax money. So it just went straight in there. I didn't have to pay taxes on it the year that I contributed, saved me a little bit of money in a tax bill, and then I'll pay taxes on it someday in the future whenever I take the money out. So really, over the course of 9 years, I averaged $13,247 actually coming out of my check that I contributed to this account. The rest of all this contribution was from my employer. If you ask me, this is one of the main draws to a 401k is if you have an employer match, you just get money for saving money. So I was going to invest anyway. I'd made up my mind. This is part of who I want to be, the life I want to live, the future that I want to create for myself and my family. I'm going to be investing. And then whenever we choose where to do that, we just have to weigh our options. Well, if I do something like a Roth IRA, I get no match. So I like the tax options there. That's really cool. But no one is matching any of the money that I'm contributing to it. So I've got to make sure and go over here first to the 401k and max that thing out as much as I can afford to and as much as makes sense so that I get all of that match money. And in the beginning, all these numbers were way smaller because I didn't actually hit the contribution limit for a 401k every year until like the last 2 years that I was working there. I didn't make enough money to do that. We had to spend more. And so I was only investing small amounts and getting small amounts back in terms of the match. But even so, we were just ratcheted up a little bit year after year. Let's invest 2% more or 3% more or 5% more this year and keep going up and up and up until it was a substantial amount of money. And then because of the fact that it's a 401k and because we had a 3% match, I got an extra $30,700 here for investing in a 401k instead of investing in something else like an IRA or a taxable brokerage account. So I bled out $119,000 worth of money, but I got the benefit of $150,000 worth of money, if that makes sense. And one of the claims that I read online claiming that 401ks are a scam and they're dispelling this myth of the employer match is that apparently someone has made a claim out there. I don't know who these people are who make these claims, but someone has said that on average, an employer pays you less whenever they have a 401k match. So if we didn't have this 401k match situation, then I would expect to have taken home this money. I could have expected to have a bigger paycheck, and then if I'd invested the money elsewhere, then I wouldn't have missed out on anything. I would have had the money at my disposal. Maybe I could have bought a sports car or a bunch of burritos along the way, but instead I got this stupid 401k match. Who wants that? I find that kind of claim pretty ridiculous because you don't know that for sure. You don't know the people who are decision makers at every single company. Maybe the first year when they rolled this out 25 years ago, maybe they had to cut some compensation there. Maybe some salaries went down or some bonuses got cut so that you could fund this thing. But overall, I don't have a problem with that because you're still getting the money. Whether I get the money in the 401k or I get the extra 3% in my check, it's not a big deal because I'm getting it either way. But for someone to be able to make that claim definitively and say every employer, every decision maker in every company who figures out if we're doing a 401k match or not, how much everyone gets paid or not, all of that gets ratcheted down because we're doing this 401k match, I think it's a ridiculous thing. If you're in a competitive marketplace, you can have a competitive salary and a competitive 401k match. I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. I think if 401k matches were huge, then there could have an impact. Yeah, if you had a 15% 401k match, that would absolutely impact your salary. But 3%, probably not impacting anybody. So here's the overall account summary completely laid out in relatively plain language. I put in 119 grand. These two line items are just two different versions of the same thing. Our employer match was broken up into a couple different kind of accounting methods that the company used. Either way, they ended up to be about 30 grand. Just in dividends, I made $13,000. And then market gains I got for having the money invested, just the value of those stocks and things going up over time was $54,000. So what's the overarching benefit of this? What's the takeaway that we can look at and read from these numbers? What are we interpreting from this and being able to decide, was this worth doing or not, right? Hindsight is 2020. We can't look forward the next 9 years and say, this is exactly what we should do, because that's impossible. If someone's doing that with you, then they're a scammer. But in hindsight, we can look back and say, was it worth parting with $119,000 over the course of 9 years to now end up with $218,000 total? Let's reframe the question and see if you would say yes or no. If I came to you and I said, Nathan, Meredith, Kylie, Dave, whoever you are, if you invest $100,000 over the course of the next 10 years, at the end of that, if you ended up with another $100,000, would that be worth it for you? Would you want to have $200,000 10 years from now? It's 2034, the middle of April. Boom, you got another 100 grand. Does that make sense to you or not? Because ultimately, that's the way I view this. I contributed 119, I ended up with 218. I basically profited $100,000. Well, $99,000 for having taken on this adventure of investing in a 401k, for choosing to not have this money with me, not being able to go out and buy burritos and race cars, and suppressing my lifestyle while I was in my mid to late 20s into my early 30s, whenever we first started having kids, really having to kind of ratchet down the lifestyle, buy a smaller house than we could have afforded, live with vehicles longer than we really wanted to, so that we could proliferate this kind of dream. I can't make that decision for you. I can't say yes or no. But for me, in hindsight, I would say yes, it's worth it. And part of the justification that we can really extrapolate from this isn't just the dollar value that it's worth today. We've got to look at what it will be worth whenever I hit retirement age. Remember, the terms of a 401k are such that if we withdraw the money early on, we're probably going to get hit with some kind of tax and penalty, and it's not wise to do that before traditional retirement age. So this money essentially needs to be put to the side, locked away, and not touched again until I reach, 62? So I just turned 37. That means I've got about 25 years to wait. What happens to $218,000 over 25 years? Let's say 25 years, 8.5% growth per year. Pretty reasonable. No additional contributions whatsoever. I quit that job. I'm making videos for you full time. I so much appreciate you being here and watching this. I can't afford to invest any more in this account right now because I'm not making enough money to do so. So what happens if we just leave this money alone until I hit 62? Calculate. To me, here's the actual value of what's happened. Because I chose to make those decisions as young as possible and go basically as hard as we could as young as possible. My projection for how much I'll have whenever I hit that retirement age is $1.675 million. Just in this one account. That amount alone in and of itself won't be enough for us to retire on, I don't think, but we're off to an incredible start. Right now, when the average American at retirement age has a 401k balance of between $200,000 and $250,000, if we can have 1.67 million just in mine, we'll be sitting pretty. If you're somebody who's watching this and you're under 30 years old, now is the time. Every dollar that you can contribute and get into some kind of investing account will grow at a tremendous rate compared to those of us in our 30s, 40s, and 50s where we're trying to play catch up. We're shoveling some money in this account, but we're only giving it a little bit of time to grow, where let's say you're 22 and you can only invest $100 a month or whatever it is for you right now. That money will grow so much more over time. I would invest as much as I could. If I can go back and do it all again, I would get even more hardcore. I would live with even less stuff because I would want to invest as much money as possible. So let's talk about some of these people who claim that a 401k is a scam. Whenever I read through these articles or these sales pitches or see a YouTube video where they talk about this, I try to keep an open mind and say, what is it that seems scammy about this? Maybe there's something that I don't know, because how can I know everything about this? I obviously don't. Maybe I missed out on some detail that actually is a limiting factor and we need to be aware of. Well, everything I've seen so far just describes limitations of an account, or they describe a reality of something like an investing account. Oh, you lock your money away. It's illiquid. You can't touch it. Well, yeah, guys, that's what it means to use a retirement account. You'll get paid less if you get an employer match. Well, maybe, but frickin' prove it. Go interview the president of the company and ask them point blank if that's what they did with our company or not. They have problems even with things like deferring your taxes until later on, claiming that there's no way you can save money on taxes by doing this, because over time, taxes go up, and so you're going to end up paying more money in taxes. I think that's one of two claims that are the closest to being actually valid, because we don't know what's going to happen with taxes in the future. And even though in retirement, you're going to have this benefit behind you of not having earned income, so your 401k can basically be a bunch of earned income for you and absorb a lot of that tax burden, because you're not going to have W-2 income from a job anymore. You're not going to be getting a check. You're going to write yourself your own check. So worst case, it's going to be basically like you kept working. That's at least my opinion anyway. But even then, let's say taxes go up a whole bunch. Let's say America gets way more socialist and everybody wants to have universal health care and universal everything, and all of a sudden our tax rate rivals Europe and we're at 55%. Well, if that's your fear, then use Roth accounts. That's part of the benefit of us having all these different options out there, is you can tailor it to your own beliefs and your own fears. Personally, I have both traditional and Roth accounts because I have no idea what the hell is going to happen. So this way I get to have kind of the benefit of both worlds. I've split the difference. I'm on the fence. I don't have to worry about putting all my eggs in that one basket or not. If taxes are super high in the future, well, then a bunch of our money is in Roth. If taxes are super low in the future, oh well, we already paid money on all of our Roth investments, and so we're not going to pay taxes on them in the future, but these other ones over here will benefit from that low tax rate. Like, there's no way to win. There's no way to, by sheer willpower, know it's going to happen, but I think picking that fight is kind of ridiculous. The only other thing that I think could be a potentially valid concern was one that was brought up by this YouTube guy, 6 reasons why a 401k is a scam. One of the things Chris brings up is the fact that people don't have enough money saved typically. $250K isn't enough to retire on. Maybe people aren't investing well enough that they're getting a good enough return that by the time they get to retirement age, oh, it's a problem now. But what's his solution? Well, you look right here in his video description. Got money for retirement? Partner with us on a deal. That seems to be the mantra with a lot of these sites. Let me tear down a 401k, make you a disbeliever in any kind of system whatsoever, and instead convince you that you need to put your money with me. The same thing happened with this site. As I was scrolling through, they offered me a free safe wealth building report. And then a little bit later on down in the middle of the article, they talk about this, where you get a free book, how you can rescue your retirement. And somehow it fixes all of our problems. It's got perfectly safe returns. It's perfectly liquid. There's not high fees. You're going to get great returns. Everything's fantastic. All you have to do is get our free book. And they actually go even further because they say there's 5 wealth-killing traps of 401ks, IRAs, and Roth plans. So no retirement vehicle whatsoever is good enough for them. You've got to go with whatever their product is. I'm guessing it's either some kind of alternative investment or potentially some kind of multi-level marketing situation, or probably some kind of insurance product like an annuity. Those are really the only 3 possibilities I can think of for this kind of a pitch, because it's not really an article, it's not really informative. It's fear-mongering with a pitch to lead you into their sales funnel. But there are people like this guy, like Unsatisfied Employee, who completely believe that kind of thing, hook, line, and sinker. He is livid that he was enrolled in a 401k plan. The USA is disgusting. He's got some kind of confusion happening about having been investing for years, but someone is telling him, we're taking your money unless you opt out, and then they make it a big hassle. Let me speak from experience here. Whenever you're investing with a 401k, no one is taking your money. We are choosing by opting into something like a 401k, or maybe your employer self-opts you in. But what's happening is you're saying, I am willing to allocate a chunk of my pay to go be invested. I own the money. The money is mine forever and always. Everything I put in is in my name, and I get to keep it. And I can say that from experience because I just took out all of that money. That's why whenever you look back at my account balance here, whenever you look at my little summary, that's why this number is negative. Because whenever I left that job, I would have had to leave the funds there just sitting there kind of doing nothing. I mean, growing over time, but I couldn't have continued to contribute with it. I couldn't have been as active and involved as I wanted to be. So I withdrew all the money. I quit the job and I took the money. That's what anybody can do with their 401k whenever you want to. I rolled it over into a traditional IRA, and here's a video all about that, what that process was like, how I got a 3% match from Robinhood, and basically the features of all of that. I think in the end, we can safely say that 401ks are not a scam. Unlike some of these people online who are trying to sell you on their product, get your money, get you to invest with them. To me, that feels a lot more scammy. All right, thanks for watching. See you guys tomorrow. Bye.